Leave my pen, don't I?
That's what I just tried to
So good morning everyone and welcome to our session about the productivity puzzle. I'm Lucy Drone, I'm the Deputy CEO at Kent and Medway Chamber of Commerce and I'll be chairing today's panel. So our focus today is very practical. So we have an amazing panel of speakers. So Dr. Blessing Nakinyo, CEO of Blay Global, working with organisations on leadership development and behaviour change. Lynn James Wellings, Managing Director of Care First 24, which is a provider of staffing solutions across health and social care. You'll have to excuse me ripping those pages off, but I have a technical problem, which is I never have a watch. And I've now put a watch on here, but it means I can't turn the page. Samantha Slee, Head of People at Sleeping Giant Media, which is a digital marketing agency. And Kate Keane, Senior Lecturer in Work-Based Learning at Canterbury Christ Church University. And last but not least, Morag Bailey, Senior HR Manager at Prep World, a food manufacturing business. So I'll take us through a series of questions. I'm actually going to go speaker to speaker today, which is a little bit different to my normal style for anybody who has ever seen me chair any of these. So we're starting with Blessing. From your work in developing leaders, what kind of behaviours, mindsets do you see most strongly linked to improvements in team performance and productivity?
Thanks for that, Lucy. Is this on? Can you hear me?
It was on.
It is on. Okay. So I think the first thing is to define what productivity is and what performance is. Glitching.
Yeah.
Testing. Oh, that's better.
Good morning, everyone.
Let's go.
We're going again.
Back.
Okay, I'll carry on. Can you hear me? Yeah. I'll project my voice. So the first thing is to define the difference between productivity and performance, because sometimes we kind of interchange with those words. So I thought I'll start from there. Productivity is how much we can get done with the time we have and the energy we have. So basic economics, really. What can we get done? It's being able to measure the output. Whereas performance is how well those results kind of measure up based on our goals, which means we should have had our goals set originally. We should know what it is we're trying to achieve before we set out with the productivity. So just have that in mind with this conversation that we're about to have. So for me, I would say the behaviors, mindsets that leaders need to have that great productivity, again, that's the output, or to be able to measure the performance, which is how well those results match against our goals, is number one, self-awareness. I always believe in leadership coming back to us as individuals. You know, before we look at others, we need to look at ourselves. So how aware are you as a leader? How do you present yourself? How do you know how you show up? Do you know what impact you're having in your space? Do you know what you reinforce as a leader, as a person in the room? And leaders need to be able to create either clarity or confusion. I don't know if you've ever been in a room where, do you want that?
Yes, please. Sorry. There you go.
What's that? Off.
No.
Well, turn this on, you said no. If you keep projecting, I'll get that.
Okay.
Clarity versus.
So as a leader, you need to be aware. Are you bringing forth clarity, or are you bringing about confusion in your team?
Now, if that's not clear, there's a problem, isn't it? If you've ever been under the leadership of
a person who isn't clear on what they're doing, team members end up creating their own shadow cultures. A bit like that. So that's self-awareness. The next thing we need to move on to is self-leadership. How am I leading myself? Coming down to that, we're going to look at your competence. I'm not talking about your competence as a profession, but your competence as a leader. Do you have leadership skills? Are you aware of what it takes to lead others? You look at things like EQ, Are you emotionally intelligent enough to balance the intelligence of others? Can you manage the room when you have other people involved? Thank you very much. Confidence to lead with steadiness, not reactive. As a leader, you can't be the reactive one. You can't be always reactive. You
Need to be able to steady yourself enough to pay attention to what's happening around you. Courage to make the hard call. Now, when there's someone in your team who shouldn't be there, do you have the courage to eliminate? I'll let that sink. Because often it's the bad egg, isn't it, that we leave in the crate that messes up the rest of it. It's one bad egg, one. And sometimes we all know who that person is, but we don't have the courage to
make that hard call, to do what we need to do, to shift the person, to change the person's workload, just to move the room around a bit. So that's self-leadership. Then there's self-agency, where I am the one that can solve this problem for my team. It's up to me. It's up to me. So bearing that in mind, we need to be leaders who can shape the room, we can shape the conditions for performance. We're not waiting to be told, we're the ones to be told. Bearing that in mind, that as a leader, you need to have the capacity in place to lead the team. You're not just a manager. There's a difference between leadership and management. I don't think that's what we're here to discuss, but I'm sure you know what that is. So making sure that you put that in place. Leaders set standards and priorities. High-performing teams are designed. It doesn't happen by accident. If you don't remember anything else I've said to this question, I want you to remember that internal structure creates external performance. How the team is structured will determine how performance happens outside of yourself. So teams mirror their leaders.
Thank you. What I love about having Blessing on a panel is that half of my follow-up questions are already addressed before I even asked them. But I knew that, so you haven't actually got that many. But I think one of the things that I would ask you is, how do you build that continuous learning rather than one-off initiatives?
Okay, I like that question.
To build continuous learning, you have to bring it back into my framework, which I've tagged the 5 W's framework of organizational culture. If you tag learning into those 5 pillars, and I'll tell you
what those 5 pillars are. Number 1 is work. Can you hear me? Yes. Work. So work is the first pillar. You need to make sure that the work is defined and you have included learning as part of work. It's not a side hustle. Part of my duty, part of my 9 to 5 includes learning. So that's in work. The next W you have is the workload. What's the workload? Do we have the capacity within the workload to include learning, or am I maxed out at 100%? We need to shift from this maximum capacity to optimal capacity. What do I mean? Maximum is I'm 100%. I'm gone. That's it. I have no time to fit anything else. I haven't got the cognitive bandwidth to take on anything else. Learning for me feels like you're just crashing my style. I can't fit it in. Whereas if we move from maximum to optimal and create that maybe 10 to 15% buffer in the workload, then leaders have the space
to reflect, to learn, to teach others as well. So bear that in mind. My 3rd W is workflow. How does work flow across your department, across your organization? This is where we look at bottlenecks. Are there bottlenecks there? Are there egocentric silos? People with their egos who block other people. Does this exist? If it does, call it out. So look at workflows. Then the 4th one you need to look at is the workforce itself. Do we know who does what? Do we have the right people with the right capabilities in place? There's no point asking Jack to fix the microphone when he hasn't got the skills to do it.
Maybe Tom can. Do we shift that responsibility to Tom to do it? So be aware as a leader, that's your job, to pay attention to your workforce, to make sure that they have the right capabilities, the right competence in place to do the actual work that is required to be done. The 5th one is the workplace itself. Where is the workplace? Now that we're all working in different places, we can work from home. Is the workplace defined in your organization? Is it delivering? Is it conducive? Is there psychological safety in the workplace? it's your responsibility as a leader. Back to that, what I said before about self-agency. It's your responsibility as a leader to make sure that the workplace is conducive, and that duty of care is part of your role as a leader.
Thank you. That kind of starts us. So leadership sets the direction, but productivity is often felt most sharply at the front end. And I'd like to move now to a sector where workforce pressures are immediate and highly visible. Lynn, if I can ask you. So care environments face unique productivity pressures. What approaches have helped you improve efficiency whilst maintaining the high quality of person-centred care that you have to do?
I think care is quite unique, that if we need a percentage of staff or a staffing ratio on the floor, other things are put aside. And our main job, you talk about productivity, our main job is making sure people feel valued and thought about and appreciated. That includes our staff. So I think what's helped me is I look at a bigger picture. Most people, pay is a big thing, it's important, okay? But people also want
Rap wasn't part of the session today. Thank you very much.
I do know the words to rap is still like though.
I won't test you.
So there's kind of, I've got a really fantastic team I've had with me for a very long time, and some of my carers have been with me plus 20 years, and some of my office team have been with me through 3 or 4 companies. So I've got carers that work for me at a local authority, and it's because I've got clear structure, CPD coming out of their ears if they want it and not if they don't. I recognise, I don't have the word carers in my business. They are care professionals, okay? The perception that care is for the less academic is absolute nonsense. We need young people in care, we need to make it look exciting and attractive, and it is an exciting and attractive place to be. We do nursing associate training and nurse apprenticeship training at our place. We offer an apprenticeship for young people, 28,000 to be a nursing associate. We pay for their release and we pay for them to go to university, and then they can go on to be a nurse. We can't get young people to come to us because they don't think care's a place to be. But if you do that nursing associate route, you can go on to become a paramedic, you can go on to become a physio, you become a care manager. Let me tell you, if you're looking for a career and you look at the care workforce, if you become a registered manager, you are going to be in the top earning percentage very soon, because 54% of our workforce are over the age of 50. Okay, so every single person that comes to work for me, I make sure they have a training needs analysis. I make sure I pay them well. I make sure that they have clear lines of responsibility. I make sure that I have good supervision that isn't just a tick box exercise. I make sure that we send them a birthday card, and we send them a Christmas card, and we send them a present. We've just ordered, I think, 400 Easter eggs. How we're going to get them out is another logistic nightmare. But if people feel appreciated, they stay. If people feel heard, they stay. We do an annual report of the whole business, and everybody writes it, and it goes out to everyone, and everybody comments on it, and we use that to write our performance improvement plan. And I'm only as good as the team I lead. I'm only as good as my last hour in care. Okay? So I am in a really lucky position that we are always advertising for staff, but we have enough staff to deliver all of our care, and spare staff, care supervisors can go out and fill gaps if there's a tragedy, something going wrong. But I think every single worker, no matter where they are, needs to feel appreciated, needs to feel listened, no matter what they do, whether they're working in a retail park and this perception that social care is for people that haven't got anywhere else to go makes me really angry and really upset. So I think part of our problem is perception of the public.
It's an interesting one because I think care has it in spades, but it's amazing how many sectors do actually identify that perception of their sector is a big issue. And I think you've touched on what you do to address the culture, to address, I love the Easter eggs. I always get really good looks in Tesco's when I go around to get our Easter eggs. The Tesco ladies do always point out they don't get one. But I don't have 400, so I can still go and do it myself. But one of the things that you've talked about is that training needs and analysis that you do with your staff. So if you have school leavers, apprentices, with apprentices it's kind of easier because it's frameworked, but what do you do once they have that training needs analysis with them? If they want to train, what's your kind of approach, your culture in terms of supporting them through that? So you've touched on it a little bit, but because I can see that that's a big part of how you address that productivity element.
I think
the mic works now.
There should be a little button just next to the decision. No rubber on it.
Little rubber
Press it
one.
in red.
that one.
Did they say never work
No.
with children, animals and technology?
Is that working?
Yes.
Okay. So the training needs analysis isn't something that happens independently. We track every single bit of training, and anyone that works in care knows we train all the time, every hour, every day. We learn something new every single day, but it's really important that it's not seen as separate to what goes on a daily basis. So we have shadowing, we have sign-offs, we have competencies, but that young person that comes to us as an apprentice might end up being a care organiser, or might end up being whatever they want to be. They could end up in finance, they could end up doing any of we've also got our own psychologist that supports all our staff. We pay for it and looks after also all of our the people we care for and their families, because some of our young people that we look after, their siblings don't know if when that person goes out the door, if they're coming back. So the psychologist for us is a really key part of our business. But we do all that wellbeing support as well. So we know the whole person, and that's important. And knowing the whole person and being able to recognise what training they might be interested in, that is additional, and perhaps they want to be. So one of our young people who's autistic that we look after is actually our autism champion, and we it's a really strange arrangement, but he wants to learn to fly, so he writes our blogs and we pay for his flying lessons, and he feels really valued and it's important. He never comes into the office, but he does blogs for us and he writes for us. And that's a training needs analysis that reaches out beyond the people that we have in our team. Our training opportunities are also offered to the families we work with, family members. They can come and do complex care training with us. They can come and we don't charge for any of that. So I think in care it's your responsibility to share learning, and it's your responsibility to show how training is part of everything we do. And every time we get a new person, I get this list of conditions. So I get 14 years old, ODD, autistic, 2 to 1, challenging behaviour, blah 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 blah. I don't know that she loves Twilight. I don't know she's got a really good sense of humour and that she's really good at cooking, and we should make that part of her thing, because all I get in my DST, which is a diagnostic screening tool, which I've got a real thing about, I get a little pen picture, which is just a token. And I say to all of my carers, when I get your CV, that's your pen picture. And then as we build our relationship, we will write a plan for you, about you, just like we do for all the people we care for. Because if we don't look after you, we we can't look after them. So I think that's really important. I also am part of the Worshipful Order of Entrepreneurs, and we dedicate quite a lot of time to young people that are entrepreneurial. So I'm helping some PHB teams, some PHB personal health budgets, people who manage their own personal health budgets, but some young people that are really good at that. And I'm working with them to offer their services to other PHB holders so they can offer their services to people who want to manage their own care. Which is a bit weird because I run the care company, but hey, there's too much work out there, we've all got to be helping each other. So I think it's all about putting the person first and wrapping what you've got around them.
Perfect, thank you. I'm going to Samantha next. That balance between capability, well-being, performance also plays in a very different way in digital, which is another fast-moving, very different sector. But so in your digital and creative sector, roles evolve really quickly. You know, we all know that. We've heard about the technologies changing. What kind of strategies have you used to keep your teams skilled, adaptable, productive in a really fast-changing environment?
Yeah, so at Sleeping Giant Media, I'm glad we're doing some things right. After Blessing said all those things, I thought, oh, I'm going to say that, that's my line. So yeah, I'm glad that we're kind of getting something right. The pace of change isn't just in digital, it's across our world, and so we have to be a business that can adapt very, very quickly. So we design it and we strategise so that it can adapt, and we need to be proactive. We can't just be playing catch up all the time or we're behind. We're not going to get ahead of anything if we're not as far as we can be. You know, things like AI have got the biggest impact in our business at the moment, and I wake up on a Monday morning and it's different from when I left the office on a Friday. And then explaining that to our staff that don't forget that thing on Friday, but we've got something new on Monday. And that can be really hard because there's noise and you've got to try and kind of filter what's the noise to what can actually have a meaningful impact in our business. But with the changing technologies and adapting, if we don't adapt, we will fail because we're in the digital world. So, you know, we have to do that, and we need to be better than our clients can be with the same technologies in which they can hold. And again, that is a craft which we are learning very, very quickly to do. But ours is, as Leslie said, it's embedding that learning into everyday work. It's not setting time aside so you can go and learn that thing, or going off for 2 days to come back to share it with everybody else. It's day in, day out. It's just normal part of your work. Sitting next to someone, you know, cross collaboration, making sure there's not silos, making sure that when you learn something new and exciting, you're sharing it with the business so that everybody can learn that new and exciting thing, because you don't know how their opinion or their skill adds to it and adapts to it. So I think that is really clear with us, and that's something we've been working on to really build that through. Another element that we sort of touched on already is that psychological safety. Make it safe for your staff to say, I don't know the answer, but we're going to work this out together. And it is really fast-paced. And it is really trying to find that solution and having solutions focused. Don't just come to me with a problem, come to me with a problem and just a couple of ideas and we'll kind of work it out together. And if everyone did that, we move faster, we learn from each other. You know, there's no blame. It's about just trying to get ahead so that we can all feel safe and comfortable. And as I alluded to, but that breaking down, sharing, and being curious rather than, so yeah, a culture where we can be curious and adaptable and confident in what we're doing to face those challenges every day when you wake up and there's something different, and we're all trying to work out what's noise and what can have a real impact in our business.
Thank you. You've kind of touched on some of the things that you do to kind of foster that kind of thing, but how do you make sure that well-being remains at the heart of that? Because I can imagine that, like in care, you know, that pace can be quite hard on a team.
Yeah, so
Is it gone again? No. So for me, well-being and like productivity are not, they're interdependent. They cross each other all the time. And so listening to your employees and then being able to find what those barriers are to try and break those down. Now, again, it alludes to psychological safety, but we want people to be able to speak up. And so at Sleeping Giant Media, we did actually embrace a tool called Water. I don't know if anybody's heard of it, but it's like an engagement survey.
They ask questions every week. It's completely anonymous, so we just get the answers. So it's, imagine just being able to tell your boss what you really think, but not knowing that it came from anywhere. We can then identify trends, we can identify anxieties, we can find out, you know, where they're at, what world they're in, and how we can support that as a business, and that's really key to us. So to be able to listen to our employees, what they want, you know, it becomes more than just, again, we talk about people being real people. Sometimes the things that they're worried about might not be directly impacted by us as a business. It's not just because the workload is too much, but it's what's going on at home. But we can actually then create wellbeing initiatives that kind of support that across the business. We provide clarity, what their job is supposed to be. We don't want that extra 30% if it doesn't need to be there. We're just really clear on what their function is to try and strip out some of that noise. And then autonomy and trust, you know, trusting our specialists that they are here to do what they do best and making sure that they have ownership. Because again, that kind of in turn creates the environment that we want, because productivity isn't about your processes, it's about the environment you're creating for them to be able to do their best work. And we all talk about, you know, our best hours, our best work, being flexible, being parents, the juggle. And if we can listen to all of that and create an environment that can be adaptable to everybody, it kind of can be that place that they want to work. But I think the last bit is that curious leadership, you know, don't assume why someone isn't being as productive as maybe they could be. Get curious, find out the why. What can we do to change it? How can we help? How can someone else, is it someone else's impact? We talk about that toxic person.
Are you happy to have that conversation with the person that is, they might be your biggest sales revenue generator, but are they causing havoc through your business? Have those conversations, and Water for us really does create that environment that allows that conversation to happen.
Thank you. I hope the microphone is back to working. It's ish. I know what it is. It's that capture, that black thing. You need to be in view of that slide. I'd like to now kind of look at it from a different angle and consider what the evidence tells us about the skills that matter the most. So, Kate, what does the current research tell us about the skills that business most need in order to improve productivity across their workforce?
Okay, thank you. Oh, I think I've got the sound, so I'll try and keep my head forwards and not move, which is difficult for me. As anyone who's ever seen me talk before, I'm constantly in motion, so I'll try and keep still. Thank you, Lucy, and listening to some of the colleagues here on the panel, what's really interesting is that some of the themes that they're talking about have definitely been recognised in some of the research that we see emerging on productivity. If we're interested at understanding what the current thinking is on jobs for the future, we often look at what the World Economic Forum produces. Now, this may seem distant and far away, but it does give us a good indication of how the thousands of organisations that they survey are considering the skills that their own organisations need in order to thrive in future. And typically, they give you a top 10 of skills. And you, as you would expect, and hearing Sam speak about digital, the first 3 of those are around sort of technological literacy, so understanding AI, understanding what we sometimes call big data as part of that, are there right at the top. So I think that technology is probably at the forefront of most of you that are running organisations' minds. So understanding how you develop strategy for AI leadership particularly features in their research. But in addition to that, there's a range of skills, and I've heard some of the ideas here, how people are working, but there is also an interest in creative thinking, because it's absolutely essential that those skills and capabilities inherent in humans are sort of targeted in the right way in order to support productivity in our organisations sort of within the next 10 years. So analytical thinking is another, and it may seem obvious that would be in there, but again, analytical thinking demands skills development, it demands good understanding of how your own organisation works and how you utilise assets within the organisation. So again, the World Economic Forum talks about this idea that individuals have, hold part of what we might call the intangible assets of an organisation. So intangible assets are the skills and the capabilities that we have been talking about already. And if we are seeking to increase productivity, and we know in this country that we have a gap, not in relation to how hard everybody is working, but in relation to the productivity output. So if we think about that gap and what that gap represents for organisations and businesses, this represents how we're assembling our intangible assets to a certain degree. The other people that we sometimes reach for when we're thinking about understanding productivity, perhaps more at the sort of the UK level, is the Productivity Institute. They've given us a good steer in the last couple of years and have produced reports on sort of the key drivers for productivity. And I'll just give you a quick run through those if we have time. But marketing and comms, so how are you working with other organisations, and hearing Lynn talk about sort of collaboration with clients and the service users, as well as collaborations with competitors, because these elements can, the sort of the sum of the whole adds up to more than the parts. So this can improve productivity across particularly sectors and regions. Access to finance sort of speaks for itself really, but understanding strategic cost management, and if you are, you use for accountancy firms, I'm in the School of Business Law and Policing at Canterbury Christchurch, and we are increasingly working with sort of accountancy firms and those who use accountancy firms, because you need to be a smart client on the money side, and there are, there's opportunities to reach for expert advice on that at all times. The third one they talk about is digital transformation. I've mentioned that already. What does that mean? Do we understand? These words that come in from research can tell us something, but it's translating that into what that means as an action plan within your own organisation, which is where the interesting work happens and where the productivity gains can be mapped. Worker skills, and several of you have already talked about this idea about being adaptable, and as leaders of organisations encouraging adaptability amongst your employees, and being responsive to the fast pace of change that we're dealing with. And finally, leadership and management. This has been on the list for an awfully long time, and leadership skills are no different to other capabilities and skills within organisations, in that they need investment and development, and some of that sits with, somebody mentioned security, people feeling secure in perhaps taking risks, which then supports in turn innovation, that organisations need to be responsive to change. I think that's given a bit of an overview of the current research.
And I mean, you mentioned you come from a university. How can organisation kind of work more closely with higher education institutions to kind of maximise that productivity when they're looking at kind of hiring or their talent pipelines, they're doing research, doing projects, kind of learning? What are the kind of avenues? And there are millions of avenues, I do know, so just a few examples would be brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. You've mentioned lots of them actually already. I mean, I think the key things to think about are, if you're looking at your own workforce and developing your workforce, that's one aspect. So seeking out opportunities for apprenticeships that may be run by the higher education that map to your sector. They can be a really useful retention tool, as we know, but also to give purpose and satisfaction to employees. Universities offer a range of opportunities for collaboration to access government funding, and some of this funding is quite significant. Now, this can seem from the outside quite daunting, but it's usually a piece of work that starts with a discussion and a development of an idea, where you have a business challenge. And universities, Christchurch is no exception. If you go to our website, there's a tab at the very top that says business services. click on there and it will take you through to the whole range that we offer. A particular programme that's underway at the moment is to enable our students and those who are currently studying in the younger age groups to access the expertise of businesses, but also to work on projects, industry projects that really develop their skill sets, so that for you as employers, you are having young people come to you for job interviews that are already work experienced, in the sense they have worked closely with regional businesses. And my colleague Laura Batts is in the room over here. Go and speak to her afterwards if you're interested in that. It's not high commitment, and I think it's going to be something that's really valuable. So that's just an example.
Thank you very much. And finally, I'd like to kind of bring the conversation to food manufacturing, which productivity, skills, process improvement really kind of comes to mind when you're talking about manufacturing. But Morag, you rely as a sector quite a lot on process efficiency, and I can imagine that at Prep World, within the food industry, processes are very important. But what kind of skills, training, investment have had the kind of biggest impact on improving productivity, on ensuring that you get the best out of your workforce?
Hello.
Yeah.
It's been really interesting for us recently. As you can imagine, we are investing heavily in technology, and the company's expanded.
Okay, can I just get you to turn just a tiny little bit? That thing's not seeing you every time the microphone goes.
That way? Hello? Thanks. Okay, so we've invested heavily in technology, and we're increasing to do that. We've got quite a generous CapEx expenditure. Now, what that's also meaning is that we are having opportunities to upskill people, and as we're bringing in equipment, we are actively engaging people to say, how can we improve processes? How would this make your work easier? And I think that's a really important part of what we're trying to do, is to actually engage people. Interesting the comment about care. People say, oh, it's not a proper job. A lot of people have the same view about manufacturing. Oh, you're working in food manufacturing, you're chopping up strawberries, that's not a proper job. Oh yes, it is. That is a highly, highly skilled job. And I'm not just saying that, they're phenomenal. And it's trying to get people to see, to really engage in the process and go, oh yeah, I'm bringing my brain to work as well. So we're looking at how we train people, how we engage with them. We've done a lot of work trying to improve inter-department working, so breaking down silos. We've done a lot of work with problem solving, getting people to say, rather than go blaming, actually how do we solve this problem together? And that's really helping improve our efficiencies. We also are looking at the information that we share with the business, the wider business, so people can see line efficiency on an ongoing basis, and that's shared across the whole business. Yes, it does bring in a little bit of competition, but that can be healthy. We're looking at the actual training plans that we put people, and just 2 weeks ago I went live with a new LMS system. And that is learning management system, so being able to actually see in real time what training people have had and what do they need, and that's helping us really help people, and it's very early days yet, but it will help us to really target meaningful training for individuals in particular job roles or particular individuals. We can tailor it to individuals. And that will also help us when we're trying to encourage people to step through the business and look at the opportunities that are there for them to grow and develop their careers. And I think a lot of people are quite surprised. And again, picking up the point here, there's some, team leaders, chef supervisors, certainly the salaries are very, very healthy, respectable salaries. And I think that often surprises people what those opportunities are in our sort of sector. So that's kind of a lot of what we're trying to do. It's probably quite simplified, but it's really, in some ways it's basic. You think, yeah, everybody does that. But actually really putting it into practice and having that
process, making sure that our managers, our leaders, that they're trained, that we train to really think about how they are managing their teams, looking after their teams, taking their teams on that journey with them so that they understand what they do, so that eventually when you go into, whether it's Marks and Spencer's or whether it's Greg's, and see that pot of fruit on the shelf and go, I need that.
And we're really proud of what we're doing.
Thank you. That's great. I think you've touched a little bit on that kind of workforce culture and continuous improvement. But how did you encourage employees to buy into that? I can give my ideas. I can say this is a problem. I can kind of thing. What kind of approach? Because you're quite a lot bigger than quite a lot of businesses that we have around. You know, what was the process for getting that buy-in?
It's been very much an evolutionary process. So the company's 13, 14 years old. So we've grown rapidly in that time, and we do have people who are still with us, you know, who've been on that journey with us. So it's been very much an evolutionary process, and it's about
encouraging and
training and people to actually speak up. It's okay to speak up. If you bring a brain to work, we employ that brain as well as your hands. So it's about really getting to feel comfortable and safe, the psychological safety of being able to come forward. You know, yes, we've got the classic mechanisms in place, you know, things like the employee forum, but it's also about then bringing them together as groups, whether it's on a daily basis on huddles, or whether it's summers. You know, we're starting to sort of build towards peak for us, which is summer. So we're doing a lot of work, bringing teams in to look at, okay, what did we learn last year? How do we put that to place? How are we going to actually take that forward? And actually say to people, you're doing the job. You're the guys on the shop floor. How can we make this better? And yes, you know, we support it with things like lean manufacturing, Six Sigma, you know, these classic manufacturing tools, GMP, good manufacturing practices, all of these things. But I think it's also about saying to people, don't just do this, but this is why we do it this way. This is why it's important. Because yes, we want you to be proud of that profit, but we also want to make sure it's safe for people to eat. And actually then people just understand it. So again, you know, some of the things that we've done around training and development, we've tried to make it as fun, as engaging as possible, because I also have an issue where a lot of my staff don't have English as their first language. So how do I get the message across to them, ensuring that everybody understands? We actually find trying to make things fun, things visual, is really a very important part of that process as well. So we're quite a visual business as well.
Thank you very much. I think all of us, next time we see a bit of pots of fruit in whichever supermarket or kind of thing, we'll think about more I can prep well. Please. I think it's really interesting to think about all the things that we don't know happen in Kent. And that's always something we understand, sell what we do. I have done enormously bad chairing and have not left very many minutes for questions. But if you do have any questions for the panel, we've got about 5 minutes. I would offer to have microphones, but I think we're just going to pass. So if you could stand up, ask a question rather than make a statement, please. If you want to make statements, then please do, and go and talk to the panel afterwards, and say your name and which organisation you're from. So the lady there, and then the lady at the front. Yes.
Hello, Sarah from Social Enterprise Kent, and my question is to Lynn. Firstly, it sounds like an amazing organisation. Can I have a job, please? And secondly, it was just really to get some guidance, really. So we work a lot on health and social care boot camps, and we get a lot of interest because they're heavily funded. So 80% of the stuff is funded. What we're finding is a little bit of a barrier is they have to be 60 guided learning hours, and that's quite a big chunk out of anybody that's got care providers that are going out to train. So is there any kind of thoughts or tips that you can give us about how we could tailor that to make it, well, so we can get it out to more people effectively?
I think there's a few things you can do. If you speak to companies like ourselves and Nelsa, if there's spare room on training, we'll let people come on it. If someone wants to come on a complex care training and we've got room, we've got a trainer there, rather it was used.
Yeah.
I think there are Skills for Care and Skills for Health have a lot of online training you can do that you can access. So as NHS England, all really accredited training and really quite interesting, and not one they can skip through.
Yeah.
You know, the skip through, press the button at the end thing, you have to read it, so they're quite good. But I'd be interested to get through afterwards, because I'd quite like, I used to be head of a training company and do apprenticeship, so I kind of get the boot camps.
Yeah.
So if I looked at the structure, I'd be quite willing to give some proper input and see where I can find some stuff for you.
That's what I was
And I've got an amazing training manager who is phenomenal, called Jane Easterbrook, and I could probably get her. And I could also send along some of my nurses to chat to you as well that have qualified with us. So
I think you've got the output, but it's a really interesting thing, which is we all have capacity to help each other. It's just having those conversations.
In care, there isn't a them and us.
No.
we work with Nelsa on a preceptorship. It's been really well received, and it just, for a conversation, we all work together. We've got to work together to make it work, so it's important. Like in every sector, we've got to work together.
I was going to say, I interact quite a bit with the food sector, and they have the same kind of approach. They do work together on quite a lot of things.
Hi, I'm Georgina, I work for Senendin Accountants. We've got quite a young trainee workforce. We've got one in particular that we've tried 2 different styles of getting him motivated to fill in his apprenticeship paperwork, both of which don't seem to have worked. Any ideas on how to get someone that you almost feel like you're nagging your own teenage son to actually do what they're supposed to be doing, and in a manner that then keeps them up to date, and go forward from there?
Do you want either of you want to take that?
I would say find his motivation.
Yeah.
That's what I would say, because he needs to get to the why, his own why.
Yeah.
That's it. So a conversation around his own motivations. So there are tools you can use to get it out of someone. You know what their motivations are, what their values are, and then kind of tie that carrot at the end of the stick.
Yeah.
Kind of thing for him.
Yeah. And I think there's also that element of, is this the right? Does he feel like this is the right end goal?
Spot on. Because it's that why. If he can't see the why, then there's no point.
Yeah. Lovely. Thank you.
Don't hide the bottom bit.
Oh yeah, I was going to agree with that, but also to say that sometimes, and I don't know his age, but confidence to complete anything can be quite a challenge with young people, and sometimes it's the sense of overwhelm. So I think, as those of us who've been through many years of form filling would know, we're experts in this. So a bit of hand-holding sometimes, providing it can get them past something that seems like a barrier, then actually something they really want will happen. And then they sort of look back and understand why that piece of admin was important.
Yeah, he started with us at about 16, 17, he's 18 now. So it's very much...
I'm really sorry. I'm going to say, if you've got more to say, then have the conversation.
Yeah, that's fine.
But I've got one final question, so I will, yes.
Dustin, you mentioned something about being maximized to being optimized. And in an environment, for example, the organization I work with, where you're constantly moving at 150 miles an hour, how do you break that cycle of being maximized and then being optimal within that environment and reflecting that leadership culture within that system?
I'm going to say, Blessing, you're going to have 1 minute for that one, which on that subject, had I known what the question was, I would
If the organization is structured to always be on maximum,
The output would always be chasing your tails. As simple as that.
So the only way to change it is by breaking it down.
To get back to that place where you're optimal, which is bringing the workload down.
To say 75, 80%, 90%, and giving that gap of that 10 to 15, where we have the wiggle room to bring in learning and bring in reflective practice.
Thank you. And can I just say, well done for very insightful to a very complex question. I think I'm going to bring the session to a close now. Sorry, the 5-minute transfer is probably going to be a bit late, but I think for me, if there's one key message to take away, is it's not a single solution that's going to address this problem. It really is kind of organisation-wide, culture-wide, and across everything. And if you would join me, I think we've had an amazing panel from a very diverse set of businesses. Please join me in thanking them for taking the time to get Thank you very much. And if you are staying in this room, please do stay. If you're